Happy Tuesday morning to you, everyone, and welcome to Morning Musings. My name is Daniel Rogers, and I'll be standing in for Dr. Don K. Preston this week as he and his wife Jan go to find out more about her health situation and try to see what the proper course of action would be for the treatment. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I appreciate your kind comments yesterday. I heard your criticism, and I took it well, and so I brought a cup of coffee with me this morning. Just to satisfy you. That way it can be an official morning musings. And just because I messed it up yesterday, I brought another cup of coffee as well. One for yesterday, one for today. So I hope that now that we're even, and we can now we can progress with the rest of the week in good faith. Well, now that we got the serious matters out of the way, let's get to the biblical matters. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I really appreciate Don's hard work in these morning musings. I just recorded an entire episode and deleted my recording. Well, actually, I deleted the second half of it. I ended it early. And so here we are, part 2. So this will be even better than what I had recorded previously. All right? Now, we're going to talk about today Daniel chapter 12. And we're continuing, I should say, to talk about Daniel chapter 12. Yesterday we established that Daniel chapter 12 is the base and the source for the text in the New Testament dealing with the resurrection of the just and the unjust. This is passages like Matthew 24:14. This is passages like Acts 24:14 and 15, and John 5:28 and 29. It's the basis behind a lot of what's discussed, well, everything that's discussed in Revelation. This passage, Daniel chapter 12, that is extraordinarily important when it comes to true eschatology. All right? Now let's consider really quick the theme of Daniel chapter, the whole book of Daniel. It has to do with the establishment of the kingdom of God and showing forth that it is God who changes the times and the seasons. It is God who raises up kings and sets down kings, gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to them that have understanding. Daniel chapter 2 and verse 21. And so Daniel paints us a picture of the supremacy of God. And now Daniel also fits with a pattern in terms of prophecy. In Daniel chapter 2, he establishes this pattern as being Rome, then the Medo-Persian Empire. Then he tells us about the Greeks. Then he tells us about Rome. I think I said Rome here. I meant Babylon. I gotcha. Then we see that he brings in another little detail about the little horn and the iron mixed with clay, but we're not going to get into that right now. The point is he fits with this. He sticks with this pattern. He sticks with it in Daniel 2. He sticks with it in Daniel 7. He sticks with it in Daniel 8 and 9. And he also sticks with it in Daniel's 10 to 12. And that's established by Daniel 10 and verse 14 that tells us that Daniel's about to find something out that has to do with the last days of his people. That is, the Jewish people. It has to do, as we'll see today, with the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. Now, whatever issues there may be with the phrase "at that time," whatever you want to say about that phrase, and I've got a lot to say about it, but I don't have time now, it cannot contradict Jesus' divine commentary of Daniel chapter 12 that he gives in Matthew chapter 24. It cannot contradict that. So when would Daniel 12 be fulfilled? It would be fulfilled, as he says in Daniel 12 and verse 7, when the power of the holy people would be completely shattered. Okay? That is Daniel's people. Daniel's people, their power, that is their old covenant relationship with God, would be completely shattered. That's the only power they had. The power of the church is the gospel. Romans 1:16. To suggest that Daniel 12 is future suggests that one day the gospel of Christ, of which Jesus said in Matthew 24 and verse 35, "Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall never pass away." You can't have the gospel passing away, folks, so you can't have a future fulfillment of Daniel chapter 12 in which the power of the church is destroyed. Makes sense? Makes sense to me. Daniel 12 would be fulfilled at the abomination of desolation, Daniel 12 and verse 11. And it would be at that time, Daniel 12 and verse 13, that Daniel the prophet would raise up to receive his inheritance at the end of the days. The end of the days in Daniel 12:13 is not different from the days just discussed in verses 11 and 12. If you want to put this as being talking about Antiochus Epiphanes and the Maccabean revolt, all right, what have you got? You've got Daniel rising up to receive his inheritance at the time of the Maccabean revolt. If you want this time to be future, then you've got the problem there with the gospel of Christ being shattered. But Daniel 12 cannot be future to us. It simply cannot be, because of Jesus' divine commentary of Daniel chapter 12 in Matthew chapter 24, the Olivet Discourse. In Daniel 12 and verse 1, noticing this comparison chart I have on the screen for you, we have Christ would bring deliverance. Now, whether you believe that Christ is Michael the Archangel, or whether you believe that Christ sent Michael the Archangel, we're not going to talk about that now. Christ would bring deliverance. Daniel 12 and verse 1. This is the same thing we see in Matthew 24, 30 and 31. Daniel 12 talks about the time of the great tribulation, a tribulation that would be greater than any other that had been or that would be. This can be seen in Daniel 12 verse 1 and Matthew 24, 21. Daniel talks about the resurrection of the just and the unjust in Daniel 12 and verses 2 and 3. Jesus discusses this same thing in Matthew 24 and verse 31 when he talks about the blowing of the last trump. Okay? And he also talks about the gathering of the people to him. All right? That's resurrection. That harkens back to the Feast of Tabernacles, when God would dwell with man. That harkens back to the wheat being gathered into the barn that John the Baptist talked about in Matthew chapter 3, referencing Malachi 4. It also harkens back to what Jesus said himself in Matthew 13 in the parable of the wheat and tares. By the way, in the parable of the wheat and tares, we have Jesus giving his explanation of that, and he quotes from a passage about the righteous shining forth as the glory of the firmament. What passage does he quote from, I wonder? Daniel 12 and verse 3. It's all connected, folks. It's all talking about the same thing. Daniel 12 prophesies about judgment. Daniel 12, 2 and 3. Jesus does the same, Matthew 24, 37 to 34. Daniel prophesies about the end, Daniel 12 and verse 4. Jesus says that the gospel of the kingdom would be preached to the whole world, then comes the end, Matthew 24, 14. By the way, that's the same end of 1 Corinthians 15. That's the same end of 1 Corinthians 1, 6 to 8. That's the same end of 1 Peter 4, 7 that Peter said was at hand. Knowledge would increase, as we see in Daniel 12 and verse 4. The holy people's power would be shattered. Daniel 12 and verse 7 says that. Matthew 24, 29, Jesus uses apocalyptic language, similar to what is used in Isaiah 13, to indicate that the stars of heaven would fall, the sun would be turned to darkness, the moon would be turned to blood. References to Joel chapter 2, which Peter applies, by the way, to his day and age in Acts chapter 2, when he said, "This is that spoken of by the prophet Joel." Many would be refined in the great tribulation, Daniel 12 and verse 10. Many would be refined, Jesus says, Matthew 24, 12 to 13. The wise would understand, the wicked would not understand, Daniel 12 and verse 10. Jesus says the same thing in Matthew 24, 15. Now get this. The wise understand, the wicked do not understand. So Jesus says in Matthew 24, 15, talking about the abomination of desolation, spoken of by the prophet Daniel, he says, "Whoso readeth, let him understand." Now get this. Paul, dealing with false teaching on the resurrection, concerning the timing of the resurrection. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, dealing with Hymenaeus and Philetus, he says, in the same context, "Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." Paul is using Jesus' own words in Matthew 24, 15. He's telling Timothy, look, the abomination of desolation hasn't happened yet. The end of the days hasn't come yet. Read so that you can understand. The same exact thing Jesus said in regards to false teachers in Matthew chapter 24. I suppose it was a parenthetical comment put in by Matthew there, but you get the gist. All right? The abomination of desolation, Daniel 12:11, Matthew 24:15, and the inheritance would be given, Daniel 12 and verse 13, and Matthew chapter 24 and verse 45. Also, Jesus said in Matthew 25:31 and following that they would inherit the kingdom prepared for them since the foundation of the earth. The inheritance would be given at the resurrection. That's undisputable. 1 Corinthians 15 says this. All right. Flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of heaven. The inheritance deals with the resurrection. Daniel 12 and 13 deals with the resurrection and inheritance. But Jesus applies Daniel chapter 12 to his lifetime, or rather his generation, Matthew 24:34. All these things will be fulfilled in this generation. Well, folks, that's all the time I have for today, and I really respect Don. I don't know how he does it, folks. I can't go under 10 minutes for one of these morning musings, but I have a few requests for you. One, you can watch all of these videos on PRI Videos, and I will post that link below in the description. Another thing is that you ought to keep Brother and Sister Preston in your prayers, as I know that you are, and I'm sure that they are very appreciative of the kind comments that you've made on YouTube and Facebook regarding her health. Also, don't forget, Preterist Pilgrim Weekend is at hand, dealing with the problems of postmillennialism. That's going to be on July 13th through the 15th. The annual lectureships at the Ludington Church of Christ will be on August the 4th through the 6th. That's in Michigan. And at that lectureship, there will be a debate between Steve Basin and Drew Leonard. Also, be sure to go to my website, www.labornotinvain.com, for articles, audios, and other resources that will assist you in your studies. There's a whole series on this subject, the resurrection of the just and the unjust, that can be found under the link Podcast Archives, pretty easy to find. I also have a book I'd like to suggest to you, Revelation Realized, Martyr Vindication from Genesis to Resurrection, from Genesis to Revelation. This is written by a very good friend of mine, Sam Dawson, and he put a lot of effort and work into this book, a lot of revisions, a lot of care, and it is worth its weight in gold. If you need to better understand the book of Revelation, then this is a book that you ought to get. It'll really help you and assist you in your studies. Thank you for joining me today, folks. I'll see you tomorrow on tomorrow's Morning Musing, where we'll compare Daniel chapter 12 to John 5:28 and 29, and Acts 24 and verse 15. Thank you very much, and have a blessed day.